The first wall was already dying. Mara could hear it in the concrete. It hummed under her glove palm as artillery shells walked their way up the valley, each impact shaking dust out of old seams. Tiny fragments of aggregate trickled from the parapet like gray snow. From a distance, the wall still looked invincible, a 20-meter-high ribbon of concrete bolted between two black cliffs. Up close, it was a tired thing, spiderwebbed with hairline fractures, sweating cold water from its joints. She drew her hand back slowly. The pads of her fingers tingled, the way they used to after a long day behind a rifle. After too many shots, too much recoil, too many lives taken through a glass circle. North section's loosening more, she murmured. The wind immediately snatched her words and tried to toss them down into the pass. It was a mean wind, barreling between the mountains and plucking at whatever stood in its way. Today that was her, a woman in a patched field parka, boots scuffed to pale leather, dark hair pulled in a tight knot at the base of her neck, breath fogging in quick, controlled bursts. Below, inside the wall, the forward outpost lay, tucked against its base like a cub under a dying mother. Prefab barracks, a motor pool of trucks that coughed more smoke than they should, a comm shack with a crooked antenna. Figures moved like ants between them. Bundled soldiers hunched against the cold, trying to look busy instead of anxious. Sergeant Mara. She didn't need to turn to know the voice. Rafi, one of the lieutenants, clanged up the steel ladder to the observation deck with all the grace of a dropped toolbox. He emerged through the hatch, breath puffing, helmet strap hanging loose. "You always pick the highest, windiest place to brood," he demanded. The wind flattened the words, but he shouted enough to make up for it. "Easier to see the cracks from up here," Mara answered. She gestured with her chin toward the north anchor, where the wall met the rock. "Look at that line." Rafi squinted, then shrugged. "Looks fine. It bows," she said. "Just a little. Maybe 2 centimeters at the top. Means the base is shifting." He smirked. "You were a sniper, not an engineer. Snipers live on details." Her eyes drifted past the wall, down the pass to where the road disappeared in a curve of snow and stone. "And I've seen walls fail. Somewhere out there, hidden by distance and weather, the enemy dug in. Their last advance had broken against this concrete with a clang of metal and screaming men. They'd left burned vehicles scattered across the road like beached whales. For 3 days after, the valley had stunk of fuel and cooked meat. For 3 nights after that, Mara hadn't slept. "Kind of poetic for someone who hates talking," Rafi said. "You see anything besides imaginary cracks? Smoke yesterday on that ridge." She pointed to a snow-loaded shoulder of rock on the western slope. "Short, thin, maybe a stove, maybe nothing. Same place last week." Rafi tried to follow her indication and gave up with a sigh. "You could say West Ridge like a normal person." "That is the West Ridge," she said. "Yeah, but you make it sound like it offended you personally." He leaned his elbows on the parapet. "So, captain's calling a briefing. Fuel, ammo, winter prep. You should come." "I'm not command," Mara said. "You're the only one who's actually fought in snow deeper than your knees." "Twice," she admitted. "And you're the only ex-sniper for 50 kilometers in any direction," Rafi pressed. "Which, by the way, is why everyone listens when you mutter to yourself about cracks." "Everyone laughs," she corrected. "That too," he said, grinning. "But afterward they check whatever you were staring at. Which is why I'm up here freezing my ass off." He waited. Mara let the silence stretch. She'd left the long rifle 3 years ago, turned in her scope, signed the papers that turned her from operative into civilian contractor. Then someone in logistics had seen Mara Kovac, top-tier sniper, 3 campaigns in high-altitude stations, and decided she'd be perfect for forward perimeter structural assessment at this pass. They hadn't mentioned that the pass was losing, that the wall was old, and that the enemy was learning. "I'll come," she said finally, after one more look at the foundations. Rafi opened his mouth as if to argue, thought better of it, and nodded. "Don't fall. Paperwork's annoying when people fall off the wall." The command bunker smelled like coffee that had died weeks ago and been resurrected in metal drums. Captain Juno hovered over a table that dominated the room, its surface covered in maps, and transparent overlays pinned with color markers. Her hair was shaved close on the sides, longer on top, braided and tucked under her cap. Lines of fatigue etched the corners of her eyes, but nothing had dulled the sharpness there. "You're late," she said as Mara and Rafi ducked inside. "You started early," Mara replied. She slipped along the wall, staying out of the knot of officers around the table. "We started when the shelling did," Juno said. As if on cue, a dull boom rolled through the bunker. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The lanterns swayed. "They're not hitting us hard yet, but they're mapping our responses." "Mortar crews?" Mara asked. "Mortars, light artillery, maybe a rocket or two." Juno tapped a grid square on the map, then another. "They're test firing along the wall. Bracketing. The next step is to pick a section and lean on it until it cracks." Mara's gaze dropped to the map. The wall traced a bold red line between the two mountains. Behind it, the base. Behind that, the tiny symbol of the village. Laska. Population currently 42 civilians. Anyone too old or stubborn to evacuate. On the far side of the wall, the pass snaked away toward the enemy territory. There were no markers there. Command didn't like to acknowledge unknowns. "What's our damage?" Rafi asked. "Minor, so far." One of the engineers, Tao, with his perpetual knit cap and ink-stained fingers, pushed his glasses up. "They're probing, like the captain said. Cracks in the north anchor, but nothing we can't shore up with fill, concrete, and rebar." Mara made a small sound in her throat. Tao glanced at her. "Problem, Sergeant? You don't pour concrete in this temperature," she said. "Not unless you want it to set wrong. It'll frost inside and crumble the first time somebody sneezes on it." He stiffened slightly. "We have additives. Additives won't fix bad foundations." Mara stepped closer, tapping the map where the wall met the northern cliff. "The rock under this anchor is slate. I walked it this morning. It's starting to shear. You use more weight on top, you speed that up. You'll get a lean." Juno watched her, eyes narrowed. "Your recommendation?" Mara didn't look away from the map. The idea had been chewing on her since she'd felt the tremors through the wall. "Build a second wall," she said. Silence. The word hung there between all of them like a joke waiting for a punchline. Then Rafi snorted. "You mean like another wall? Behind this one? While they're trying to blow up the first?" "Yes." Mara traced a line roughly 20 meters behind the existing wall, curving with the topography. "Lower, not as thick. It doesn't have to be fortress grade. Just enough to catch rubble from the first wall if it fails, and to give us a fallback firing position." Everyone laughed. Tao said, almost gently, "You do realize that, right?" Some of them actually did laugh. A short burst from one of the younger lieutenants. A choked chuckle from someone in supply. "Do you know how long it took to pour the first one?" Another officer demanded. "We had 6 trucks, heating rigs, 3 crews, a full summer." "It took 3 months," Tao supplied. "We have 3 weeks, at best, before the really bad weather moves in." "We don't pour this one," Mara said. She looked up, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "We build it." "With what?" Tao asked. "Hope and sand." "Rock," she said. "Snow. Timber from the dead village. Earth. Pesco cages, sheet metal, wrecks from their last assault. Anything that bulks and stacks. You're engineers. You tell me you can't make a barrier out of junk." Rafi dragged a hand down his face. "You want to build a wall of trash while under fire." "I want to survive the winter," Mara said. "The first wall won't. Not as it is." Tao bristled. "You can't know that." "I can," she said quietly, "because I've watched a wall just like this one come down in an avalanche of its own broken pieces. I had friends on it. I watched them fall with it. The enemy barely had to touch it. The frost and bad foundations did most of the work." She tapped the map again. "This one will go the same way unless we plan for failure." The bunker felt suddenly smaller, the air tighter. Juno leaned back, crossing her arms. "You're saying it's inevitable?" "I'm saying if it doesn't fall to shells, it might fall to snow," Mara said. "You've seen the forecasts." Rafi grimaced. "Mountain meteorology's more superstition than science." "Last year's blizzard buried an armored convoy," Juno said. "And that was in a lower pass." "Exactly," Mara said. "We can't gamble that they'll call off their offensive just because it's chilly." The captain stared at the maps for a long moment, lips pressed together. "Even if we wanted to do this, Tao said, his voice calmer, but no warmer. We lack materials. People. Time. Our crews are already patching the first wall, reinforcing the foundations, maintaining generators. And if the first wall fails despite your best efforts? Mara asked. There was no bite in it, just a question. What then? He didn't answer. We fall back to the base, try to set up firing lines between prefabs and snowdrifts, Rafi offered. Not great. We evacuate, someone else muttered. We can't evacuate with the fuel we have, Juno said sharply, cutting that thought off. And we're not leaving Alaska for them. Her gaze slid back to Mara. Explain the second wall in detail. Mara exhaled slowly. She'd hoped she wouldn't need to. That someone else would point out the same weaknesses, propose something similar, be the one they laughed at. But here they all were. Between the inner base perimeter and the rear of the main wall, there's a depressed section, she said, tracing with her finger. Slight bowl. Snow collects there. We dig it out along a curve that mirrors the wall. Use the dirt and rock as fill. We stack HESCO barriers we got in storage. Add gabions from wire mesh. Break up abandoned vehicles. Seed them into the structure. Timber framing. Then we pack snow and ice into the gaps. You can make pretty hard stuff that way if you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing? Rafi asked. She gave a humorless half-smile. High North Station, third campaign. We built ice bastions. They held until spring. Tao rubbed his forehead. The moment the sun comes out, your second wall turns to slush. By the time the sun comes out, Juno said, this offensive will be over one way or another. Right now we're talking about 3 months maximum. Less, Mara said. The blizzard will hit before then. It'll lock us down. It'll lock them down too. And you think a second wall built of scrap and ice will stand up to bombardment? Tao pressed. No, Mara said. I think it will slow down rubble. He blinked. What? It's not meant to take direct hits, she said. The first wall does that. The second wall catches parts of the first. It forms a broken-backed ramp instead of a clean breach. It keeps them below our firing lines, even if they think they're through. Rafi's brows rose. So we turn the space between walls into a kill zone. Yes, Mara said simply. Damn, he muttered, in a tone that carried reluctant respect. Juno drummed fingers on the map's edge, thinking. Shells rumbled distantly overhead in a slow, unfocused rhythm. If we do this, she said finally, we'll be building under fire. Mara nodded. Men outside, in the open, stacking crates while they try to zero in on our positions. Yes. Mortar crews are already probing, Juno said. Heavy guns will join them soon. You're asking me to risk construction teams in that. I am, Mara said. Her voice remained calm. The same way you risk sentries on the wall now. The same way you risk patrols at night to mark enemy positions. Why should I? The captain asked. The question wasn't hostile. It was the genuine why of a commander with more lives on her ledger than her own. Because the cost of building under fire is less than the cost of being trapped with one failing defense when the sky decides to kill us too, Mara said. And because you're going to run out of rebar and good concrete long before you fix the north anchor. The bunker held its breath. Rafi looked between them. You know they'll laugh, he said lightly, as if it would lessen the stakes. Second wall. Out of junk. Under fire. It sounds insane. Everyone laughed the first time I suggested sniping through a blizzard, Mara said. Visibility's bad, they said. Wind's impossible to account for, they said. No way you can hit like that. What happened? Tao asked despite himself. I learned to watch the snow instead of the target, she said. And I hit a convoy they thought was safe. Juno's mouth quirked. I read that report. Mara shrugged. Just saying. Laughter doesn't change physics. The captain straightened. Decision hardened her features, set her shoulders. All right, Juno said. We do it. We build the second wall. Tao let out a strangled noise. Captain, we build it as far as our resources allow, Juno added. Tao, you'll design the structure. Use everything we don't absolutely need elsewhere. Prioritize speed over elegance. Rafi, you'll help coordinate labor and cover while they work. Mara, her gaze pinned the ex-sniper. This is your idea. You're on it. You live in that space until I say you can come in. Mara nodded. Understood. One more thing, Juno said. The storm forecasts are saying what exactly? Tao dug out a printed sheet, eyes skimming. Cold front moving in 4 to 6 days. Snow. After that, models diverge. High chance of sustained heavy snowfall within 2 weeks. Possibility of an extreme event, blizzard conditions, high winds, whiteout, for an unknown duration sometime in that window. In other words, they know it'll be bad. Juno translated, but not how bad. Yes, Tao said. Then we build like hell, Juno said. And we hope it's enough before the blizzard hits. They didn't laugh to her face, not most of them. But Mara heard it in the mutters as they hauled out old Hesco cages from storage, clanked metal mesh against metal posts, dragged warped wooden beams up from the gutted remains of Laska's burned-out houses. A second wall. Someone snickered as they passed. Because one wasn't depressing enough. Out of trash, another replied. Maybe we can ask the enemy to throw their empty shell casings over, so we can use those too. Under her parka, sweat prickled between Mara's shoulder blades despite the cold. She kept her face blank. A lifetime of hiding emotion behind a rifle scope served her well. Just ignore them, Rafi said, shouldering a roll of mesh as they trudged toward the scrape line where the second wall would rise. You know how people get. Laughing means they're scared. Laughing means they don't understand yet, Mara said. Same thing, he answered. The first day, they just marked the curve. Mara walked it with a spade, cutting a shallow groove through the snow that traced a jagged arc from one end of the base to the other. She adjusted for dips and ridges, for drainage channels, for buried rocks she could feel through the steel of her boot toes. Rafi trotted alongside with a GPS unit, trying to translate her instincts into coordinates the engineers could plug into their software. How do you know where to put it? He asked. Where it has to be, she said. Yeah, but what are you looking at? Slope? Distance? Feng shui. She pointed at the shadows between drifts, the way the snow piled at certain angles, old avalanche scars on the cliffs. The wind comes from there most days in winter. When the storm hits, it'll be worse. That means the snow will bank here, not there. This area will accumulate. Over there will scour. We want the second wall where it'll be strengthened by drifts, not undermined. He blinked at her. And you just know that. Spent a lot of time staring at snow, she said, waiting for people to walk across it. He shivered, and it wasn't from the cold. By afternoon, the first shells started falling closer. They came in lazy arcs at first, like the enemy artillery crews were still getting warmed up. Each impact threw fountains of white and shards of rock into the air. The sound thudded in Mara's chest. Men flinched, ducked, swore. A few dropped what they were carrying and sprinted for cover. Mara stood where she was, watching plumes, measuring intervals subconsciously. Old habits rose like ghosts. They're ranging us, she said. Obviously, Rafi muttered, crouching with his mesh spool behind a half-built parapet. They're bad at it, she added. She pointed as another shell screamed over and slammed into the valley wall, a good 30 meters away from anything important. See? Overshooting. Undershooting. They don't have a spotter with a good angle. Good, Rafi said. Let them be bad. It won't last, Mara said. Once they realize we're building something, they'll focus. As if the enemy had heard her, the next round landed close enough to rattle the teeth in her skull. Earth leapt. A chunk of frozen mud clipped her shoulder. She staggered, then straightened. Hey, Rafi snapped. Body has this survival instinct thing where you duck when someone lobs explosives at you. You might want to try it. Somebody has to watch the pattern, she said. Tell Tao where to send the repair crews, where to move workers when they get too close to zeroing in. Can't Tao do that? He demanded. Or one of your precious spotter drones? Drones can't feel the blast, she said. And Tao's courage lived in numbers and diagrams, not open ground. The second day, she brought her rifle. It was technically not hers anymore, not according to the form she'd signed. But the quartermaster had shrugged and handed it over without comment when she'd shown up and asked. You sure? He'd said, eyeing the long, heavy weapon. Yes, she'd said. He'd sighed. You bring it back in one piece, Kovac. It settled against her shoulder with the familiarity of an old scar. She lay prone on the rough boards of an unfinished firing platform halfway up the first wall, the rifle's bipod dug into a sandbag, her cheek resting against the worn stock. Below, the construction site for the second wall boiled with movement. Figures swarmed over the curve of half-filled cages and rough earth mounds. Trucks rolled in with scavenged materials. A track loader scraped a path through packed snow. Beyond, the valley stretched toward the enemy lines. Snow blurred distance, wind carving the drifts into ripples and shelves. Somewhere out there, artillery belched. Through her scope, Mara scanned. She moved slowly, methodically, letting the field of view glide across the white. A flicker, heat shimmer over a dark patch of rock. She paused, dialed in a little more magnification, adjusted for distortion. There, a muzzle flash winked, small and bright. A second later, the boom reached her ears. "Grid C7, third ridge back," she said into her radio. "Mortar nest, 2 tubes." Marking it, she shifted her aim a hair, waited between heartbeats, and squeezed. The rifle bucked gently. On the ridge, one of the dark shapes lurched backward, then didn't move again. She fired twice more, each shot measured, then ducked as a shell from a different direction arced toward the wall. The blast threw snow onto her position, pattering her hood and sleeves. She spat grit. "Rafi," she said, shifting her scope southwest. "Tell your people to clear out of the southwest sector, now." "Why?" came a scratchy reply. "We just got the mesh." "Because they've got your range," she said. "Move." He swore, but she saw workers scattering like kicked ants below, dropping tools and diving behind berms. A heartbeat later, the place they'd been standing turned into an expanding ball of fire and ice. Shrapnel rattled off the first wall, hissing inches over her back. She stayed flat, waited for silence, then resumed scanning. She didn't hit every enemy gunner. You couldn't. Not with this wind, not with the shifting snow, not with the distance. But she hit enough. Slowly, the shelling pulled back, became less precise. The enemy learned caution. It gave Tao and the engineers breathing room to stack their ugly, improvised barrier higher. "Nice work," Rafi said that night over a cup of something calling itself stew. "There were walking shells right over our heads until you started sniping." "It won't last," she repeated. "They'll adapt. Then you'll adapt back," he said, with the kind of thoughtless confidence that made her stomach twist. "That's your whole thing, right?" Her whole thing used to be ending people from far enough away that she never saw their faces properly. Now, it was keeping her own people alive long enough to maybe not die in the snow. She didn't bother to correct him. The wall grew. It wasn't much to look at least at first. From the observation deck on the main wall, it resembled a badly planned sculpture made from rejected parts. Pesco cages bulged with stones and dirt. Twisted metal beams jutted at odd angles. Sections of burned-out vehicle hulls formed jagged plates. Wooden frames rose from the structure, lashed with wire and cabling. But from Mara's angle on the ground, walking the curve each morning, boots crunching over ice, gloved fingers brushing rough surfaces, it began to make sense. Here, Tao had thickened the base where the terrain dipped. There, he'd added buttresses angled back toward the base, turning the wall into more of a wedge. In places, half-buried holes formed hollow tunnels that could become firing positions. Above them, the first wall groaned and cracked and held. Occasionally, a shell hit closer than anyone liked. One afternoon, Mara was helping haul a section of mesh into place along the eastern flank when the world turned to roar. The blast picked her up, flung her against a block of concrete. For a second, her ears were nothing but a hot rush. Her shoulder screamed. She slumped into the snow. A shadow loomed. Rafi's face swam into view, his mouth moving. She blinked. Sound faded in like someone tuning an old radio. "Hear me? Mara, you good?" "I'm fine," she lied automatically. She tried to sit up. Her left arm protested. "What hit?" "Outer parapet took a direct," he said, helping her to her feet. Blew a chunk the size of a truck tire off the edge. Mara squinted up. Sure enough, a jagged bite marred the once smooth crest of the wall. Reinforcing rebar hung like broken ribs. "How many?" she asked. "2 wounded, 1 dead," Rafi said softly. Mara's throat tightened. She swallowed on it. Repair crew? She asked. Tao's already screaming for one, Rafi said. You sure you're okay? You bounced. I've bounced before, she said. That much was true. He looked at her as if he wanted to say something else, then just pressed a fresh set of earplugs into her good hand. Put these back in. We can't replace your hearing out here. Can't replace yours either, she pointed out. I don't need mine, he said, grinning. I never listen to anyone anyway. She almost smiled. Days bled into each other. Shells came. Snow fell. Men cursed, laughed, worked, slept. The second wall crept upward meter by meter. Alaska's villagers watched from a distance. Wrapped in their own patched coats, they lingered at the edge of the base's outer perimeter, eyes narrowing as they tried to understand what the soldiers were building. Old Mrs. Novak, who had lived through more wars than anyone could count, shuffled up to Mara one evening as the ex-sniper was measuring a gap between gabions. You're putting a new wall behind the old wall, the old woman said without preamble. Yes, Mara said. Waste of time, Mrs. Novak declared. Mara sighed. Why is that? The mountains decide who lives, the woman said. Her face was a map of creases and scars. You can stack stones until your hands bleed. The snow will still fall where it chooses. The wind will still blow how it likes. Maybe, Mara said, but we can choose where we stand when it does. Mrs. Novak eyed her. You're the sniper woman. I used to be, Mara said. You killed men who never saw you, the old woman said. Not as accusation, but as statement. Yes. And now you stack trash in the wind. Mrs. Novak sniffed. War is silly. I agree, Mara said. The old woman laughed, a short, dry bark. Good. That means you might live. Foolish people die first. She shuffled away, leaving Mara alone with her thoughts and the growing wall. The storm warning sharpened. Tao's printouts grew more frantic, lines and symbols clustering in ugly patterns. The mountains to the west wore a crown of boiling gray more often now. When the wind shifted, Mara could smell snow the way she used to smell rain in the lowlands, metallic and distant, a promise wrapped in threat. They say this one might be historic, Rafi told her over breakfast, waving a sheet of forecasts like it was propaganda. Top 3 blizzards of the decade, maybe century. Historic, she echoed. That's one word. Another one is lethal, he said, then grinned crookedly. But I figured that one out all by myself. She put down her mug. How much more can we get done before it hits? Rafi's grin faded. We're almost at full height on the central section. East and west flanks still short. Tao's complaining about structural integrity with all the different materials. We're chewing through fuel faster than anticipated. Meaning in about a week, we choose between generators and vehicles, he said. And we're getting to the end of spare mesh, too. Captain might cut us off. She won't, Mara said, but it felt more like hope than certainty. Juno didn't. When Tao argued for rationing materials, for focusing on shoring up the existing wall instead, the captain listened. Then she told him to keep feeding the second wall. Reinforce what we know we'll lose, or build something that might save us afterward, she asked him. We do both if we can, but if we have to choose, we prepare for failure. People will say we're surrendering already, Tao warned. People say a lot of things. Juno glanced toward the parapet, where Mara stood outlined against the sky. Some of them are even useful. That night, as the sky turned the color of a dirty bruise and the wind climbed up the scale from annoying to serious, the first real snow of the storm came. Not the polite powder they'd had before, dusting everything in white. This snow arrived in hard, stinging flakes that slapped exposed skin and stuck immediately to every surface. In the glow of the floodlights, it looked less like weather and more like someone pouring flour into the world. Mara stood on the second wall's half-finished central section, shoulders hunched under her parka, the collar pulled up as high as it would go. Could still blow past, Rafi said, raising his voice to be heard. His scarf muffled the words. Skirt the pass. Drop all this somewhere else. It won't, she said. You're a pessimist. I'm observant, she said, tilting her head toward the mountains. Hear that? He listened. For a moment, there was only the rush of local wind and the hiss of snow against mesh. Then, faint and distant, a low humph rolled across the peaks. A second followed, Closer. Avalanche, he said. Small one, she said. Early collapse of hanging cornice. Means the layers were weak. The new stuff's heavy. It'll bring more with it. Rafi shuddered. You talk about killing and avalanches in the same tone you talk about coffee. Coffee doesn't usually try to bury entire battalions. Avalanches do. Your point being? He asked. My point, she said, is that we're building this just in time. The blizzard did not come all at once. It would have been kinder if it had. Instead, it crept closer in stages, like an animal testing the edge of campfire. Snow thickened. Wind grew teeth. Temperatures dropped until every breath scraped at lungs, and every exposed fingertip became an emergency. The enemy increased their shelling one last time, as if trying to beat the storm to the kill. For 2 brutal days, the valley shook. Artillery pounded the first wall, chipping, gouging, hammering at weak spots. Mortars bracketed the second wall site, forcing workers to burrow into pre-dug trenches and half-finished tunnels whenever the whistle of incoming became too sharp. Mara stopped sleeping. She dozed in hour-long snatches wherever she fell, rifle within reach, boots still on. Dreams were messy, looping things, walls falling, snow swallowing screams, faces she'd forgotten she ever knew peering at her through drifting powder. When she woke, she dragged herself back to the parapet, to the firing platform, to the scaffold edge above the second wall, where she could watch and mark and call out. East flank, pull back, she shouted one afternoon, her voice raw. Another shell had just slammed into a notch in the original wall, sending chunks the size of helmets hurtling into the air. Secondary collapse, likely. She was right. The half-shattered parapet gave way in a grinding lurch, dumping rubble over the side. It crashed down onto the forward slope, sending soldiers scrambling. Holy! Rafi skidded to a stop beside her, panting, snow clinging to his uniform. That almost took Goran's head off. You hear the crack or something. Saw dust, she said, and felt it through the boards. You're unnatural, he said, but there was gratitude woven into the insult. By dusk, half of the first wall looked like a boxer that had gone 10 rounds too many. Bruised, chipped, breathing hard. The enemy guns fell mostly silent as night came on and the storm tightened. Snow turned sideways. Wind roared, battering the walls with invisible fists. Visibility dropped to 5 meters, then 3. Floodlights showed only a churning, gray-white curtain. They've pulled back, Juno said, standing in the command bunker doorway, watching snow whirl past. Even they aren't stupid enough to advance in that. For now, Mara said. For now, Juno agreed. Now, what do the models say now? Nothing, he said. We're outside the range of their original parameters. They didn't account for this much moisture meeting this particular cold front. Closest analogs show sustained blizzard conditions for anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Rafi repeated faintly. That's an edge case, Tao said quickly. But possible, Mara said. You think the generators can run that long? In theory, Tao said, if we ration carefully, if intake vents don't get blocked, if we don't lose more fuel to leaks. If, too many ifs, Juno cut in. Mara listened to the wind for a long moment. It prowled around the bunker like something alive, looking for cracks it could squeeze through. I need to be on the wall, she said. Juno turned. You can't see anything out there. Maybe not now, Mara said. But when visibility breaks for a moment, someone has to be ready. If they try to use the storm as cover and breach the first wall, we won't get a second chance to react. And the second wall? Juno asked. It'll hold better in this than the first, Mara said. Lower profile, more flexible materials. Snow will pack into it and strengthen it. She hesitated. In theory, Rafi echoed, half a groan. Go, Juno said. Take whoever you need. We'll keep things running here. The second wall crew? Mara asked. Stand down unless absolutely necessary, Juno said firmly. I'm not losing people to frostbite and flying debris for a few more meters of height. What we have will have to do. Mara nodded. Understood. The blizzard swallowed the world. Mara had seen snowstorms before, of course. Whiteouts. Sudden squalls that turned a clear day into a fog of crystals. But this was bigger. deeper. It felt less like weather and more like the mountain range itself had decided to inhale and hold, trapping everything beneath a suspended sky. On the first wall's parapet, bundled in 3 layers of clothing, goggles crusted with ice, she could only see as far as the second wall's highest points, and even those appeared as shifting shadows in the maelstrom. Sound blurred. The constant hiss of snow on stone, the boom of wind, the occasional deep groan of stressed concrete all melded into a background roar. Her radio crackled in and out, sometimes clear, sometimes clogged with static. She learned to tell, by the quality of the interference, whether a gust was about to rip across the wall hard enough to knock a man off his feet. "Why are we up here again?" Rafi hunkered against a parapet notch near her, his scarf covering most of his face. The only thing visible were his eyes, narrowed against the ice. No one could climb that wall, even if they wanted to. It's a vertical sheet of frozen hell. Because the only thing worse than being surprised by the enemy is being surprised by the mountain, Mara said. If an avalanche comes down on this, we need advance warning. Advance warning of what? He demanded. It's not like we can move the wall. No, she agreed. But we can move us. He opened his mouth, then shut it. Fair point. Hours blurred. At some point, someone brought up a thermos of something hot. At another, a replacement team arrived to relieve them, faces already pale. Mara stayed. She moved from station to station, checking on sentries, adjusting placements. She slapped frostbitten cheeks, yelled at people to change out wet socks, forced one stubborn corporal to go below when his fingers went white in a way that had nothing to do with snow. "You can't order me," he'd started. "Yes, I can," she'd snapped. "Because if you lose those fingers, you're useless to me. Go. Get warm. That's an order." He grumbled, but he went. She counted that as a win. On the second day, the storm somehow intensified. Wind velocity spiked, beating at the walls with a howl that vibrated in bone. Snowflakes grew larger, chunkier, more like ice chips than gentle crystals. They stung exposed skin like blown sand. Mara's world narrowed to what she could touch. The stone beneath her boots, the icy grit on the parapet, the weight of her rifle across her chest, tied with a loop so the wind couldn't snatch it. The steady presence of Rafi when he insisted on shadowing her rounds despite her repeated suggestions that he had better things to do below. "Someone has to make sure you don't freeze in some corner," he muttered. "You get this weird, focused look and forget you have a body." "There are worse ways to go," she said. "Not for me," he retorted. "I like mine squishy." Sometime in the deep blue-black hours that might have been night, the wind shifted in a subtle but important way. Mara felt it first on the skin of her cheeks. A different angle, a new note in the howl. Then she heard it, a low, rolling thunder. Not the sharp crack of artillery, not the explosive cough of mortars. This was deeper, longer. It started as a murmur on the far slopes and built into a roar that ate the world. "Avalanche," she whispered. Her heart kicked. Big one. Even muffled by snow and distance, it was enormous. The cliffs vanished behind a moving wall of white as tons of snow, loosened by days of storm, tore free. It billowed downward in a churning mass, swallowing rocks, scrub, old scars. "Which side?" Rafi shouted. "West," she said. "Main paths above us, but secondary routes." The roar grew. The very air seemed to vibrate. Snow underfoot shook. The first wall groaned, a low, terrified sound that matched the sudden clenching in her gut. "Down," she snapped. "Where?" Rafi demanded. "Second wall," she said. In retrospect, that made little sense. But instinct didn't care. Instinct saw the shape of slopes, the angle of fall lines, the way the mountains seemed to lean. She grabbed Rafi by the webbing of his vest and hauled. He stumbled after her as she half slid, half ran along the parapet toward a set of stairs that led down the inner face. Behind them, the avalanche slammed into the opposite side of the valley. It hit like the fist of something ancient and angry. Sound became a physical blow, flattening men to the deck. Powder exploded upward in a geyser that rose higher than the wall itself. Then the world turned white. Snow poured over the parapet in a breaking wave, a Niagaran curtain of frozen slurry. It hammered down into the gap between wall and base, filling trenches, burying equipment, smashing lightweight structures. Mara and Rafi reached the stairs just as the overflow struck their section. The wall shuddered. She felt it through her boots, through her bones. A crack snapped, loud enough to cut through even the roar. Stone shifted under her feet. "Move!" she yelled, shoving Rafi ahead of her down the stairs. Snow crashed over the top of the wall, slopping into the interior like water breaching a dam. It hit the second wall site as a heavy, rolling mass, a tide of dense, wet, deadly white. Mara saw it for a split second as they emerged onto the inner slope. The second wall stood there half-finished, ugly. The avalanche loomed behind it, higher than any building, packed with ice blocks and shattered branches. If the second wall hadn't existed, that mass would have rolled straight into the base, into the prefabs and fuel tanks and generator sheds. It would have swept them away like toys. Instead, it hit the second wall. The impact crushed the central section inward, driving cages deeper into the ground, splintering timbers, bending metal. Snow poured up and over, but its momentum broke. It fountained, slowed, spilled in a slower wave toward the base. Inside, Mara screamed. She grabbed Rafi and Dove for one of the hollow spaces they deliberately left within the second wall. What Tao had dubbed service tunnels, and what Mara had secretly thought of as foxholes on a grand scale. They tumbled into the dark as the world above them roared and boomed and pressed. Snow rammed into the tunnel mouth and kept coming. It packed itself tighter and tighter, hissing and thumping. The light outside vanished. The air turned sharp and cold. For a moment, Mara thought, "This is it. This is where it ends, under my own damned wall." Then the onslaught eased. The roar rolled on, moving past, then away down the valley. Silence rushed in behind it, so complete her ears rang. She lay there panting, her body pressed between Rafi and the wall, the ceiling low over them. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her eyes burned. "Still alive," Rafi croaked. "Apparently," she rasped. In the dimness, their breath fogged. Snow had squeezed through cracks in the mesh above, dusting everything with a fine layer of frost. Mara shifted, testing limbs. No sharp pain, no grinding bone, just the familiar throb of bruises. "We're sealed in," Rafi said, groping toward the tunnel entrance. His hand met packed snow. "Totally blocked." "Good," Mara said. He stared at her. "Good. If it blocked, it means the second wall took the hit," she said. "Not the base." "You're impossible," he muttered. "You're trapped in a snow coffin, and you're thinking about structural performance." "Someone has to," she said. He laughed once weakly. "Everyone laughed when you proposed this stupid thing. You know that." "I noticed." "They're not going to laugh now," he said. "Then the avalanche really was historic," she said dryly. He snorted. Then his expression sobered in the half-light. "You saved my life," he said quietly, "dragging me off the wall like that. If I'd stayed topside, you would have gotten a closer look at the avalanche," she said. "Very funny. I didn't do it for you, specifically," she said. "You were just in the way." "Liar," he said, but there was no heat in it. They fell into silence. The air in the tunnel was thin but breathable. The mesh above them creaked occasionally as the packed snow settled. Drips formed where warmth radiating from their bodies melted tiny paths. "How long do you think it'll take them to dig us out?" Rafi asked eventually. "Depends on whether they can get to us," she said. "That's comforting." "If they can't," she added, "we can dig ourselves out. Snow's worst pressure is over. We work toward the base side. It's closer." "Just once," he muttered. "I'd like an optimistic answer from you." "I am optimistic," she said. "We're not dead yet." He sighed. "You really used to shoot people for a living?" "Yes." "How do you go from that to this?" He gestured vaguely at their icy prison. "You mean building walls instead of breaking men?" "Yeah." She thought about it for a moment. "I got tired of pulling triggers and watching the same mistakes repeat. Thought maybe if I helped build something, the mistakes would be different." "And?" he asked. "They are," she said. "But they're still mistakes." He huffed out something that wasn't quite a laugh. "You're a downer, Kovac." "You signed up for this conversation," she pointed out. Their radios crackled suddenly, making both of them jump. "Anyone read?" Juno's voice emerged from the static, broken but recognizable. Forward cruise, report status. Second wall sector, do you copy? Rafi fumbled for his unit. This is Lieutenant Rafi, second wall sector. I'm with Sergeant Mara. We're alive but buried in one of the interior tunnels. Location, Juno demanded. In the background, Mara could hear shouts, clanging metal, the muffled chaos of damage control. Rafi looked at Mara. She considered. Central section, about 50 meters east of marker pole 16, she said. Tell them to look for an intake vent. It might still be clear. Did the second wall hold? Juno asked. Mara listened to the faint sounds filtering through snow and mesh, the distant rumble of settling drifts, the occasional clatter of rock. Yes, she said. It took the main impact. Base should be mostly intact. You tell me if the generators are still running. A pause. Then, lights flickered but held. Some outer structures are damaged, but core facilities are in one piece. Inside the first wall, we took a hit, but fewer than expected. Mara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The avalanche would have crushed us without your barrier, Juno continued. You were right, and I was right to listen to you. Told you, Rafi muttered. Don't start, Mara said. The bad news, Juno added, is that the first wall didn't like that at all. We've got new cracks, visible bowing in the north and central sections. Tao says it's a miracle it's still standing at all. It's not a miracle, Mara said. It's temporary. His words, not mine, Juno said. We're digging toward you now. Sit tight. Try not to bring the ceiling down. Affirmative, Mara said. The radio clicked off. Rafi tilted his head back against the icy wall. So, you built a second wall under fire. Everyone laughed. Then the blizzard came. Avalanche tried to kill us. Your junk wall saved the day. How do you feel? Cold, she said. He groaned. You ruin every cinematic moment. Tao's going to analyze this avalanche's force, she added thoughtfully. He'll want to redesign half the structure based on the data. You're thinking about building more? He demanded. Did you not get enough near-death today? The storm's not over, she said. The first wall's not going to improve with time. We might need to thicken parts of the second. You're impossible, he said again. And you talk too much, she replied. It took 6 hours to dig them out. By the time a circle of light finally broke through the packed snow, Mara's toes had gone numb and Rafi had run out of stupid jokes. Hands hauled them up into a blinding blur of white and gray. The air outside the tunnel felt almost warm compared to the trapped chill inside. Snow still screamed sideways, but someone had rigged tarps and boards to form a crude shelter over the tunnel mouth. You look like ghosts, Tao said, peering at them through fog glasses. His nose was red with cold. His hair stuck out from under his hat at odd angles. You look like you haven't slept in days, Mara replied. I haven't, he said. Same as you, apparently. She pushed back the hood of her parka and squinted around. The second wall looked different. The avalanche had smoothed parts of its face, packing snow hard against mesh and metal, rounding some corners, sharpening others. In places, cages had buckled inward under the pressure. In others, the drifted snow had filled gaps, turning the whole structure into something more monolithic. Beyond it, partially visible through the blowing white, the first wall loomed. Large chunks were missing from its parapet, especially where the avalanche had clipped it. New cracks radiated from the north anchor, darker lines against the pale dusting of snow. But it was still standing. I expected worse, she said. You can thank your trash, Tao said grudgingly. The second wall redistributed the force. Some of it slid along the slope instead of slamming straight into the base. We lost 3 outbuildings, but the fuel tanks held. Casualties? She asked. He grimaced. 8 dead, 23 injured, most during the initial impact. It could have been much worse. Mara thought of the convoy in her third campaign, swallowed by a sudden slab avalanche. 52 dead, no survivors. They'd found helmets poking out of the snow months later. Yes, she said softly. It could have. The storm's still going, Tao said. We're in a lull between bands. Meteorology says it'll ramp back up in a few hours. Could be more slides on the other slopes. The first wall can't take much more abuse. The second can, she said. especially now that the snow has reinforced it. He frowned at the structure. You were right about the snow strengthening it. The density readings are off the charts. It's like stone. Ugly stone, but stone. Any beauty was accidental, she said. Juno appeared then, ducking under the makeshift canopy. Snow clung to her lashes. Her cheeks were raw. You all right? She asked, looking Mara over head to toe. Still functional, Mara said. Rafi too, unfortunately. Hey, Rafi protested weakly. Good, Juno said. She looked up at the first wall, then back at the second. You have any more bright ideas, Kovac? Mara considered. The blizzard still howled. The enemy was somewhere out there beyond the white, their plans interrupted by the avalanche but not erased. The first wall stood, but precariously. The second had proven its worth, but might face more tests. We treat the space between walls as our primary battlefield, she said slowly. Assume the first wall will fail in sections. We set up firing positions here on the second. Tunnels, bunkers, slit windows through mesh. We pre-sight lines. We establish fallback routes. We move key supplies behind the second wall, not the first. Tao looked vaguely offended. You want to fight for my beautiful structural experiment? Yes, she said. That's why we built it. I thought we built it to catch rubble, he said. Multitasking, she answered. Juno smirked. Anything else? If the blizzard lets up enough for them to try and assault, they'll think the avalanche weakened us, Mara said. They'll aim for damaged sections of the first wall. We can use that. Set demolitions to bring down controlled collapses where we choose, funneling them into kill zones we can cover from the second wall. Rafi whistled softly. You really hate giving people a straight path, huh? Straight paths are for parades, she said. Tao rubbed his temples. You're going to give me more headaches than the storm. Better than giving you funerals, Juno said. Make it work, Tao. Rafi, help Mara with sighting. Use your fancy gadgets. Mara, do whatever it is you do to make murder efficient. I'll coordinate with the rest of the units. Yes, Captain, they said together. As they worked, measuring angles, marking positions on the second wall, carving small embrasures where mesh and snow allowed. Word filtered slowly through the base. The avalanche had been enormous. Men on the outer watch posts who'd glimpsed it between gusts spoke of a moving mountain. The shockwave had knocked them off their feet. If not for the second wall, they said, the base would have been wiped clean. Everyone laughed when she started this. One mechanic told another, nodding toward Mara as she walked by with a coil of rope. I did too. Swore she was crazy. And now, his friend asked. And now I'm glad she's crazy on our side, the mechanic said. Mara pretended not to hear. Her cheeks burned in the cold anyway. The blizzard didn't stop, but it changed. After the avalanche, the snow turned finer, the wind slightly less murderous. Visibility increased from 3 meters to maybe 10. Enough to make out shapes, but not detail. In that half-world, life at the pass settled into a new pattern. They dug out partially buried buildings. They reinforced weak sections of both walls. They rerouted paths through new drifts and collapsed trenches. They rotated men in and out of exposure, counted fingers and toes obsessively, drank things that claimed to be coffee until their hearts jittered. Mara lived between walls. She slept in one of the tunnels they'd expanded into a modest bunker, wrapped in a sleeping bag that always smelled faintly of damp canvas. She woke, checked weather, checked structural stress, readings Tao fed her, walked the curve of the second wall like a solitary wraith. She still brought her rifle, though there was rarely anything to shoot. Mostly she watched. Once, in the middle of what passed for day, she caught a flicker of movement near the base of the first wall on the outer side. She froze, breath suspended. Through swirling flakes, she saw silhouettes hauling something toward the damaged section of the parapet. Not their own troops. They moved wrong. Slow. Stumbling. Civilians. Rafi, she said into her radio. We've got movement outside the first wall. South Central Sector. Civies. Looks like they're using the storm to try to cross to us. Are they insane? He demanded. Desperate, she said. They scrambled. Getting a gate open in this storm without letting the entire base fill with snow was an engineering nightmare. But Tao and his crew managed a narrow lift of a service door. Mara helped pull 3 people through, half frozen and half buried in snow. An old man, a young woman, a child clinging to the woman's coat. "You weren't evacuated," Juno said, incredulous. "We hid," the old man gasped, his lips blue. "Didn't want to leave our land. Thought it would all blow over." "The war?" Juno asked. "The storm," he said. "The war never blows over." They took him inside. They wrapped the woman and child in blankets. They made space in already crowded barracks for 3 more. Mara went back to the wall. "Do you ever think about not coming back up here?" Rafi asked her once, watching her climb the ladder yet again as the wind tugged at her coat. "No," she said. "Never. If I'm not here, I'll just think about what's happening here," she said. "I might as well be where my thoughts are." You could argue with that logic. He didn't. The enemy tried again on the 5th day. The storm had eased just enough that their commanders must have decided it was now or never. Maybe they feared the same thing Tao did, that prolonged cold would break their own logistics before the walls. It started with distant thumps muffled by weather. Shells arced through the gray, their trajectories distorted by wind. They slammed into the first wall, kicking up fresh plumes of snow and dust. "Here we go," Rafi muttered, checking his rifle. "Positions," Juno's voice crackled over the radio net. "Everyone to pre-assigned sectors. Mara, I want her eyes on the damaged parapet north side. If they try a breach there, I'll see it," she said. She lay on the second wall now, not the first. Her vantage point had changed, but her mission hadn't. The rifle felt as much a part of her as ever, snug against her shoulder. The world narrowed to the crisp edge of the scope. The enemy rockets came next. They whined through the sky like furious insects, leaving faint trails. One slammed into the already weakened north anchor of the first wall. This time the wall screamed. The sound was a low, tortured shriek, the death cry of concrete and steel. Mara felt it behind her teeth. Cracks raced out from the impact point like lightning. The northern section of the wall bowed forward, then back, then forward again. "Brace!" someone shouted unnecessarily. The anchor gave. A chunk of wall the size of a house tore free and toppled outward. It hit the snow below with the force of a meteor, shattering into massive blocks. The rest of the damaged northern section slumped sideways, deforming the wall's once proud line. New fissures zigzagged across its surface. Dust billowed. "Breach!" someone yelled over the radio. "North section breached." "Negative," Tao's voice cut in quickly. "Outer wall failure only. Second wall still intact." "Repeat." "Second wall intact." Through the scope, Mara saw shapes emerging from the swirling white beyond the fallen concrete. Enemy soldiers, huddled in winter gear, pushing forward. Some hugged the cover of broken wall segments. Others slipped into hollows carved by the avalanche. They moved in fits and starts, wary of hidden dangers they couldn't see. Mara's breathing slowed. She adjusted her aim slightly to account for crosswind, for the way snowfall highlighted eddies and gusts. She remembered that first campaign blizzard, when everyone said visibility made precision impossible. She watched the snow, not the men. The flakes streaked past her scope's view in patterns. When a gust kicked up, they angled sharply. When the wind lulled, they fell straighter. She timed her shots between gust peaks, where their drift would be predictable. She squeezed. A soldier's head snapped back, a dark flower blooming against the snow. She shifted, fired again, and a man who'd just raised a rocket tube folded in half. "Engagement from second wall positions," she reported. Her voice sounded calm, almost bored. Inside, something old and cold clicked into place. Other guns joined hers. Rafi fired from a slit a few meters down, his own rifle bucking. Behind them, machine gun nests they'd built into the second wall structure opened up, spitting tracers through the storm. The sound hammered the air. The enemy advanced anyway. They poured through the gap in the first wall like water through a cracked dam, scrambling over broken concrete. Some carried ladders, others demolition charges. A few fired wild shots toward the second wall's muzzle flashes. "Detonate charges on outer rubble," Juno ordered. Explosions rippled along the base of the fallen wall section where Tao and his crews had buried shaped charges days ago, just in case. The blast shattered larger chunks into smaller ones, turning the breach into a maze of jagged obstacles. Snow and dust geysered. Men screamed. Mara kept shooting. She moved from target to target, prioritizing anyone carrying heavy weapons, anyone shouting orders, anyone who seemed to be spotting. She ignored the ones scrambling, falling, trying desperately to find cover. She'd never had the luxury of conscience at this distance. She still didn't. Her job was to break the momentum. The storm that had tried to kill them earlier now worked in their favor. The same snow that obscured enemy movement also betrayed it in subtle ways. Disturbed drifts, sudden shadows, a flash of dark cloth against white. "You're grinning," Rafi shouted between volleys. She hadn't realized she was. Just remembering that everyone laughed, she called back. He barked a laugh of his own. "They're not laughing now." The enemy reached the outer edge of the second wall in a few places, pressed against its rough face, trying to find purchase.